All right, welcome back to KP Reddy Unpacked. This is my opportunity to sit down with KP Reddy, the CEO and founder of Shadow Ventures and Shadow Partners, to ask him, hey, KP, when you posted that on LinkedIn, what were you thinking? What inspired that? What was going through your head? What was the reason behind that story that you just told, maybe on LinkedIn? If we've never met before, my name is Jeff Eccles. I'm a senior advisor, head of marketing at Shadow Partners. And as always, I'm joined by KP Reddy. Hi, KP.
Hey Jeff, how's it going?
It is going well. I am looking forward to unpacking this post today as we're recording this. You posted this a couple of days ago, so probably about April 8th. And one of the things that intrigues me about this, you talk about Sunday scaries, and I'll read the whole post here in a second, but you talk about Sunday scaries. We've covered Sunday scaries before. That's become a new series for you. But what's also interesting about this post is that it connects with one of your earlier books. You've got a new book coming out, April 30th, I believe. It's going to hit, whatever books hit now. Hit
Bookshelf,
shelves,
the
bookshelves.
shelves.
So,
Check it out in your
so
public library.
yeah, there are these things called books. It's a lot of
Books.
paper bound together. Yeah, so April 30th, it'll be bound together and it'll land on bookshelves everywhere. Um, but the book that this post that we're going to talk about really speaks to is one of your earlier books. Everything you know about startups is wrong. So I find that intriguing. It's got a lot of ties to with everything that goes on in our community and our ecosystem. So let me start by reading it, and then we can unpack it. So it starts out, this week's Sunday Scaries. I decided to let my 23-month-old son sleep on me for his nap instead of putting him in his bed while I write this. It's very easy to forget our why as entrepreneurs. The narrative of doing things for our family as an entrepreneur has been widely overstated. The reality is that to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be pretty selfish. It's your vision and your dream. Your family is along for the ride, and the best case is that you stay connected enough that they are able to hold on. The work-life balance principles do not apply. I have found myself giving away more copies of my book, What You Know About Startups is Wrong, to spouses and significant others of founders than actually to founders. Why? Because I think that founders are rooted in optimism, and that is the fuel for their growth. A life partner or family can sign up for that optimism and be supportive quite blindly. My book helps them understand the downsides. So on this scary Sunday, as we prepare to be warriors of the week, I'll be in New York City teaching at Columbia and NYU while having 13 meetings and hosting a happy hour. A light week. Hug your kids and your significant others. They will never truly understand your condition as a founder. It's not their job to do so. They can't hold on alone. That's your job. Have a great week. So that's a very personal post,
Mhm.
a very heartfelt post, and it's rooted in a lot of years of experience and earned wisdom. So, how do we unpack this particular post?
Yeah, I think, one of the things, I keep a copy of my book with me, not because of ego, because of any of that. I think you write things at a point in time, at a point of clarity. And for me, a lot of my writings are like my compass, my North Star of how I want to live my life, so to speak. And my book is definitely one of those. There's no tips and tricks in how to do a pitch deck. Like it's none of that. It's a very personal um, book, and I think I carry it around to remind myself, like about my compass and North Star, because there's things I do that my wife will even catch. Like, hey, that's funny because that's the exact opposite of what you told people in your book, and I'm like, oh man, like you're right, you got me. So I think I was sitting there with my son going, I can put him down and go do work, go crank out a LinkedIn post, go do whatever it is I do on a Sunday. Or I can just sit here with him and quote unquote spoil him, which you can never spoil a 23-month-old baby, really. Um, and just kind of, so I was just kind of thinking, and as I was kind of thinking about, like, hey, I'm going to hang on to this kid for his entire nap, which is 2 to 3 hours, and not really, and get some quality time with him, at least in this way, and just really realizing, like, God, like, I need to go read parts of my book again, like, I forgot, right? And and everybody, like, I am on the road constantly, which means I'm away from my family constantly. And I think the part to take for granted is, as a founder, it's like, well, they signed up for this. Like, we talked about it. Here's what we were going to do. And it was going to be a bit of a rough go at the beginning. And I think this idea that, like, well, your spouse knows what they signed up for, that is 100% true. If you've been honest and authentic, and if they read my book, they know exactly what they're getting into. Right. Um, However, that doesn't mean you don't have a part to making it easier for them, and I think that's the whole point. And I think the image I posted was from the movie Cliffhanger, from with
Mm.
Sylvester Stallone, where he's like holding on to a line, with his legs, and he's holding on to a person that's falling, right? So it's like, while we're hanging on to our business, using most of our body strength to hold up our business and do the things that we need to do, um, it's not just for the other person to hold on to us. And we got to hold on to them. And even though everybody, hopefully people have been honest with their significant others and family, and everybody's gone into this journey eyes wide open, it doesn't mean that you don't have a role to continue to support your family and hold on to them while you're moving along. And I think, um, it's a really tough thing for founders, because literally sometimes you get in this mindset, which, oh, if I don't respond to this email this afternoon, I mean, the world will come to an end. And honestly, I've been in a situation where that has been the case. If I didn't get some back to somebody, a contract wasn't going to get done, and they were going on vacation, and whatever, it was a purchasing cycle. So they had to get the PO to me by a certain time, otherwise it was going to the next quarter. I mean, there are significant issues that 2 or 3 emails that afternoon could make or break the company. And there are situations like that. And so it doesn't mean that, you can't procrastinate some of that stuff, and you have to do it. It just means you need to acknowledge, like, hey, I need to go handle this right now. And I still do it, right? I'm still kind of in the grind, right? You get Slack messages from me Saturday, Sunday, 2 in the morning, whatever, that's just what it is. But I just felt like it was a good time, as much as, one writes for others to share
Mm.
information, quote unquote wisdom. I guess I can call it wisdom because I have a gray beard. But it's as much for you. It's as much for me. For me, it's just as much writing these LinkedIn posts. Sometimes it's cathartic for me to get stuff out of my brain and onto a piece of paper. And then my piece of paper happens to be LinkedIn. And I like to think that I'm transparent enough. And then hopefully, it's one of these things where if one person gets value out of it, it's worth it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the important thing, right? It's that when I used to speak from stage a lot, that was always my mantra. There's one person in this room that needs to hear what I have to say, and that's enough. Um, I think, as you're talking about that, we've got a lot of things going on. Obviously, we've got the startup incubator. Um, we just had our virtual pitch for the last cohort a couple of weeks ago. We're taking applications now for the next cohort, which is going to kick off this evergreen situation where we're always running. So we see lots and lots of founders, and you talk to lots and lots of founders. You hear pitches every week. Um, you host the thing called the Founder Circle in the network as well, in the Catalyst network, which is kind of funny because I think when we kick that off, I think there is maybe this perception. It's like, oh, KP is going to talk about, how to start or how to pitch or how to, whatever, right? Some of these logistical or technical how-to things, but you've really approached that in a, I think, in a very similar way to what you're talking about here. Is this is the life of the founder. Let's talk about what it's like to be a founder, not, your pitch deck, et cetera. And one of the things I know from my own experience too is that, um, as much as we go into things eyes wide open, we have no idea, right? There's, what's the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody
Until
has a plan till you
they get
get
punched
punched
in
in
the
the
face.
face.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so you go into it eyes wide open. You go into it open and authentic and all of that, and communicating with your family, your significant other, whoever it is. But things change, and so that has to continue. So for all of those reasons and all the things that we have going on, I love this. I love this approach, and I also wonder how many people know that KP has this other book called "What You Know About Startups Is Wrong."
Yeah, it's funny. Like I give away so many copies of it, but it's funny. People like friends of mine were like, "Hey, like you got a new book coming out. I guess you're going to be making a lot of money." I'm like, if only, like if only you make money off of books. You don't make money off of books. I really think for me, I write books because I want to share. Right? It's a great way to share information. It's a great way for me to synthesize my thoughts and thinking. In fact, my book, What You Know About Startups Is Wrong, actually was a journal that I was keeping for my kids. My dad died when I was 15. So I've been literally kind of on my own, making my way since I was 15 years old, including for a while, I had to do a stint where I lived out of my car. Like it was a tough time. But I realized as my kids were getting older, no, when your dad dies young, you kind of perceive that like I'm going to be lucky if I make it as old as he was, right? Kind of thing. And so I started taking lots of notes of all the wisdom I wish my dad was around to share with me. And so that's how it started off. And then I showed it to a friend of mine, and I was like, hey, just like read this. Like, is this like the words of a madman? Just like read it. And then I meet up with her. She's like, dude, I cried all night. Like, this is like, this, you killed me with this. And so I was like, cool. Like, okay. She's like, you have to turn this into a book. And I was like, you want me to put my stuff out there in front of everyone? She's like, I wouldn't take your journal and turn it into a book. But there's a lot of good stuff in here that everyone needs to hear. And, at that point, there was that, rise and grind type culture, everybody's grinding kind of thing. And so she thought it was super relevant with what was going on, at the time. And so that's why I turned it into a book. It was really like something very personal that I put together to share with people. And I've had CEOs of very large firms tell me, like, I don't know why you call it like What You Know About Startups Is Wrong. It kind of applies to everybody. Whether I'm the CEO of a $2 billion company or I'm a founder, one person founder. And so I thought that was always interesting. I think I just had, my binary thinking is startup founders grind, CEOs of $2 billion companies play golf. Like, it's that kind of thing. And so I had a lot of feedback by executives saying, like, I don't know why you said it's startups. This applies to everyone. So yeah, so it's always fun, when especially coming off finishing, the last year writing my new
Mhm.
book. It's nice to kind of almost be nostalgic around my old book. But know that it's still working for me, right? Know that I'm still going back to it, and I'm still using it as that North Star for me. I'd like to think people can glean points in it to create their own North Star. But it's been really helpful for me.
So I think that's a really interesting juxtaposition. So your new book, again, out April 30th. What's the title of the new book?
Creating the intangible organization, intangible enterprise, how to thrive in an AI driven future.
So business talk, right? Business, um, the speed of change, emerging technology, the explosion of AI, et cetera. And what I think is interesting about that juxtaposition is I know that there are people out there, they're so focused on, oh my gosh, AI, generative AI, whatever. whatever the emerging technologies are that they want to focus on. We talked quite a while yesterday in one of the mastermind groups about robotics
Mhm.
in AEC, and there are plenty of people out there that are so focused on that change that they're going to say, well, yeah, you wrote that book, the other book you wrote, the what you know about startups is wrong. You wrote that in a time before AI, right? So are you going to update the book post AI, which I think isn't, to me, and I'm not, to be clear, I've
Yeah.
not heard anybody actually ask this question. I think it's an interesting idea, but I also think that what you're going to say is that yes, everything is changing, but not much is changing
Hmm.
related to, where we started out talking about this post.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've had several people, my last book is now 5 years old, and my book before that is 11 years old, 12 years old. And so I've been asked, like, hey, are you going to do an update?
Mm,
Especially with the startups book. I have a whole chock full of news stories to add to it. So they're like, hey, you should do a second edition and add, because I keep living and I keep experiencing. So there's new things, right? Trials and tribulations. Um, but that my latest book, like stylistically, I just share a lot of stories. It's a lot of
mhm,
storytelling
yep.
because I found that the more I can personalize, I'm an open book in most ways, not in all ways, but in most ways. And I've just found that if I can put everything through my lens of my life and my story and my experiences, people kind of get it. They may disagree with it, but nobody can disagree with your own life experience. Like that's what I
Yeah, yeah.
experienced. Like, you may disagree with my experience because you didn't experience it. And so what I've really tried to do in the new book is really weave my life stories. Having been working in AI for almost 13 years, like it's not a new thing. There's definitely like things that are accelerated, obviously, but there's a lot of patterns and experiences I've had around the feelings that people are having with AI. I'm not an expert. Don't ask me to write code type of thing. Someone else will have to rewrite whatever code I write, right? So it's not about that. I think the visceral feelings that people are experiencing in this age of I have felt before. I feel them, I've felt them, I know what those are. And if I can share stories that are around those set of feelings that people are experiencing, well, around just saying AI in front of them, say AI in front of people 3 times and they might like pass out, um, is really what I've tried to do, is really to say, I know how you're feeling, or at least I think I know how you're feeling. And here are times in my life I felt that same way. And here's how those outcomes worked out. And here's how people I've talked to have experienced those feelings. So as much as like it's so funny when I wrote my startups book, people were like, "Hey, like it was not what I mean, I loved it. It's not what I expected. I thought it was going to be pitch decks and how to pitch a VC and tips and tricks, and it was like none of that." And I think if people think my AI book is going to be about AI, like they don't get me. It's not going to be. I mean, it's about AI, but it's much more about how do we process these visceral feelings we're having into tangible actions to thrive. So that's the soundbite.
It's a good soundbite. If you click your heels together 3 times and say AI.
It's wild. I mean, I've been like these students at NYU day before yesterday. That's all we're talking about. Like AI. That's I mean, look, and there's a reason why people are talking about it. I think I had another post. I was like, the reason people are talking, like, if you're tired of hearing about AI, you were probably tired of hearing about Taylor Swift.
Yeah, yeah, it
But you
was.
can't take anything away from either of them,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, and
Just because
it
you're tired
doesn't.
of hearing about Taylor Swift does not make her mega. AI is no different. If you're tired of
Yeah,
hearing about it, doesn't mean that it's not mega.
yeah, that's your thing, right? It's
Mhm.
still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Not to go too far off on the AI tangent, but I mentioned our mastermind group earlier, and I know that it would for some folks, if they were a fly on the wall in these mastermind groups, it would just be blown away. I spent yesterday facilitating both those groups, so 3+ hours, right, with these innovation leaders, and pretty much two topics: AI and robotics,
Yeah.
revolving around and tangents on those and how they're used and how they affect. And but two things that come up all the time and did yesterday: communication and people,
Hmm.
right? Which kind of comes back to this post as well. It's for all of the innovation leaders that are focused on vetting AI tools and building AI tools and wondering how robotics are going to affect their business model in the next 3 years and all of these things. The conversation will eventually always come back to people in communication. Those things, they're constant there. And it's different, obviously, than this post. I keep pointing over here for those of you watching the videos. The post is on that screen over there. But but this the story related to your book, what you know about startups is wrong. I think is spot on. And for those of us who are on any journey, I think we need to take notes here.
Hmm.
Let me read it again before we wrap this up. Again, KP and I do this every week. We sit down and we unpack one of his posts on LinkedIn. If you're not following KP on LinkedIn, so KP Reddy, Reddy, if you're not following him on LinkedIn, I've got questions, right? You need to be. He posts a couple times, maybe 3 times, maybe one time every day. All these posts are inspired by conversations, by travel, by startups that he's vetting, work that he does on the advisory side, etc. And this one goes like this. This week's Sunday Scaries. I decided to let my 23-month-old son sleep on me for his nap instead of putting him in bed while I write this. It's very easy to forget our why as entrepreneurs. The narrative of doing things for our family as an entrepreneur has been widely overstated. The reality is that to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to be pretty selfish. It's your vision and your dream. Your family is along for the ride, and the best case is that you can stay connected enough that they are able to hold on. The work life balance principles do not apply. I have found myself giving away more copies of my book, What You Know About Startups is Wrong, to the spouses and significant others of founders than actually to the founders. Why? Because I think founders are rooted in optimism, and that is the fuel for their growth. A life partner or family member can sign up for that optimism and be supportive quite blindly. My book helps them understand the downsides. So, on this scary Sunday, as we prepare to be warriors of the week, I'll be in New York City teaching at Columbia and NYU while having 13 meetings and hosting a happy hour. It's just a light week. Hug your kids and your significant others. They will never truly understand your condition as a founder. It's not their job to do that. They can't hold on alone. That's your job. Have a great week. KP, thanks for this post. Thanks for
Absolutely.
unpacking it with us. This is a good one, and I hope everybody takes a little bit of something from this and takes it to heart.
All right. Good talking to you, Jeff.
All right, we'll wrap it there. Let me just check and see if there's anything in the chat. Stephen Cameron, hi Stephen. He says, "Preach." Kids, especially, and spouses to some degree, care way less about what we do for them than just being with them. That's a great perspective, Stephen.
Yeah. 100%.
Yep.
All
All right,
right.
we're going to wrap this up. Again, we do this every week, usually at 11 a.m. Eastern, but KP's traveling, so we're just adjusting a little bit for his schedule. You're going to be at Columbia today, is that right?
Thursday.
Thursday,
Yeah.
okay. So Wednesdays at 11.
Yep.
You can see when we adjust this, but we
Yeah.
do this live every week. We do this recording for the podcast. You can catch the podcast recording over in the Shadow Network, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks,
All right.
KP.
Yep.
Thanks.